Don Mazzella here again for Small Business Digest. Uh, Today I have a what I call my fun guest. People who go out there and do something because they saw a need. Carolyn Haeler is one of those people, and we welcome her today. Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Carolyn, as we ask all our guests, first tell us a little bit about yourself, then tell us about the product that you put together in your company, and finally, where people can learn more.
Got it. Sure. My name is Carolyn Haeler, and I'm the founder of Mightylicious. And I think the story sort of begins in business school. I had the fortunate opportunity of going to business school where Barry Nailbuff was one of the professors, and he is one of the founders of Honest Tea, which is now Just Tea, a company that was founded by him and Seth Goldman and then purchased by PepsiCo. And I sort of got the bug for entrepreneurialism through that story, but didn't really have an idea. So I ended up going into finance and worked in finance for a decade. And during that time, I was in New York City working at JP Morgan. I was diagnosed with celiac disease. So I had lived 31 years of my life as a very hardworking, very ambitious, motivated person who could eat anything and could enjoy all the conveniences that modern cuisine affords a person. And then all of a sudden, my health deteriorated. My hair is falling out. My digestive system wasn't working. My immune system shortly after that stopped working. And my doctors had no idea what was wrong with me. They finally diagnosed me with celiac disease, which was a relief because while it is a chronic disease, it is manageable.
Carol, I'm going to interrupt you. Slow down. Well, it takes us a while to catch up with you.
Sorry, I do
Uh,
speak fast. So I was diagnosed with celiac disease, and I continued working in finance and sort of had to navigate a life and a lifestyle that was imposed upon me. And it was really important. Celiac disease is chronic. It impacts your immune system ultimately, and you can die from cancer if you don't manage it. But I react very quickly. So if I have trace amounts of gluten, even if gluten is used as a filler in cinnamon, say, and I sprinkle, a dash of cinnamon on my coffee, I will react to that in about 180 seconds. So my life changed dramatically because what I learned was that gluten's in everything. It is used as a filler, it's used as a color, and it's used as a preservative. So you can find it in things like cinnamon. You can find it in things like cold cut. So you're getting sandwich meat. It can be a preservative in sandwich meat, and it's used as a coloring. So it's in everything from Coca-Cola and ginger ale to cookies, to crackers, to bread, anything that has caramel color in it, which is most things, has gluten in it. So even if a product you think would be gluten-free, like ginger ale, like no one is taking a sip of ginger ale and thinking they're consuming gluten, you actually are. And so that eliminated the majority of products in the grocery store for me. And so I started living gluten-free and purchasing gluten-free products. And one of the trends that emerged as I'm sort of living a very high stress lifestyle, getting up at 5 a.m., being at work at 7 a.m. before the markets open, being a stockbroker for the rest of the day, and then going home ultimately exhausted, not until the sun is set every single day, was that a lot of the foods on the market that are gluten-free are less convenient and they're less appetizing. And a lot of the reason for that, or in my opinion, the reason for that is if you look at some of the largest brands out there, almost all of them actually, doesn't matter if they're a large brand or a small brand, they are created by a parent for a child with a severe food allergy, which means that the person who created the product isn't actually eating it on a daily basis. Which means there's a lot of sympathy and love in those products, but not a tremendous amount of empathy. And I say empathy because the needs of an adult in their 30s working at a bank is completely different from a 4-year-old. And the way I decompress and my needs, even my dietary needs, but also just my emotional needs and the fulfillment and the enjoyment and even just the relaxation I get from eating, is completely different from that of a child. And so I found that most of the products were like not worth purchasing, to be honest, which meant that I was now living a life where I had to, if I wanted a cookie, I had to bake it from scratch, which is time consuming. And when you're living as a stockbroker, you're not you don't have a lot of extra time to go home and bake cookies at night. Um, and I literally had, it was 2017, so I'd been living with celiac disease for 5 years. I was working at a hedge fund at this point, so my life was even more chaotic. And I was Christmas shopping, and I'd been shopping all day. I was hungry. I was exhausted. I'd forgotten to have breakfast or lunch, and I have all my gifts, and they're in my cart. And there's like 100 people standing in front of me because it's Christmas time, and everyone's doing the same thing. And there's this package of gluten-free cookies on the shelf in front of me. And I was like, oh, great. I'm going to grab that. And I'm just going to have that as a snack. And then I'll get lunch when I'm done. And I put the cookie in my mouth, and I literally like spit it out. I was like, that isn't even food. I can't even chew it. I can't even swallow it. It's so bad. And then I had to purchase them. Of course, I threw them out before I left the store, and that was it. I was like, I can do better. I can make a better product than this. The gluten-free community at large and the allergen-free community at large deserves better. They deserve a cookie that tastes like a cookie, that deserve a cookie that they want to eat. They also deserve a cookie that's better for them and that they know is good for their health and is going to nourish their body, but it's also going to nourish their soul. And so I spent.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Look
Yep.
into the camera. You're looking at to where me. Don't look, but you got to look forward. And,
Okay. Sorry. Sorry to that. Is that better?
Better.
Okay.
People you're looking that way and you're going to lose your audience.
Okay. So I'll look at, is this where I'm looking now? Good.
Perfect. Now.
Okay.
Forget me.
Okay. Sorry. So, I literally went home and started baking cookies in my studio apartment. I had a 24-inch sort of oven that I used. I started making prototypes and testing recipes and starting to understand and figure out the chemistry of gluten-free baking, which is completely different from normal traditional baking with wheat flour because you don't have the protein content. I spent 3 months baking cookies every single day. I left my job. I was like, I'm doing this. I baked for 16 hours a day. I would get up at 6 a.m. and bake until, 8, 9 o'clock at night, made millions of terrible cookies. And I finally had a recipe that I really liked. I was like, this is the best cookie I've ever made. It's one of the best cookies I've ever eaten. And from my learnings at business school and the story of honest tea, I purchased a tin Thai coffee bag off of Amazon. I created my own label and printed it out and put it on the top front of the bag, made it look as professional as I could, put my cookies in. And I would live on the Upper East Side. So I walked into the Whole Foods on 86th Street in New York City and was like, just looking for feedback. I was like, I have this cookie. I'm looking, thinking it's a prototype. Looking for feedback on it, which is what they teach you in business school. And the person at the information booth goes, oh yeah, go talk to Chris at the bakery section. He's a team leader, and just ask for Chris and you can give him your cookies. So I was like, hey, is Chris there? And he was standing behind the cake counter. And he goes, yeah, hi. I was like, oh, I make gluten-free cookies and I'm just looking for some feedback. So he was like, oh, let me try. Gave him the cookies. He said, this is the best gluten-free cookie I've ever tasted. Go down to Union Square and go to Brooklyn. We're the 3 Whole Food locations in New York City that sell the most gluten-free. And we have this local forager program at Whole Foods. So if all 3 of the team leaders, they are like you, just ask for the team leader. We'll email the regional office and they might onboard you. This was a Thursday, and I was being onboarded to Whole Foods by Monday. It was astounding because it takes, now that I've been in the game a few years now, it takes years to get these types of accounts. So that was, 3 months after I had basically come up with this idea. I had no licenses for commercial baking. I had no commercial baking facilities or equipment. I had no anything. So fortunately, when you're onboarding to a big company like Whole Foods, it takes about 3 to 6 months to get onboarded. So I got the notification that they wanted to onboard me in end of June, and I didn't actually physically hit the shelf until January of the following year. So I had a full 6 months to sort of get my ducks in a row. And for the first year, I was baking cookies. I was working finance. At this point, I was like, I need a job. So I got another job in finance, and I was working full-time in finance and then the weekends baking Saturday and Sunday, fulfilling orders for Amazon for a full year. I started in 3 Whole Foods. Baking for Whole Foods, which is now Amazon, on the weekends. So I started in 2018 in 3 Whole Foods. Then by a few months later, I think I was in 10. And by the end of the year, I was in the entire Northeast region. And then 3 months after that, so 13 months after I'd hit the shelves, I was in the Northeast and North Atlantic region. And baking by hand at that point had become impossible. I was renting a commercial kitchen out in Queens and just baking there 8 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday. And I went to a commercial facility across the bridge in New Jersey, which I currently am still there today. And it's basically, we've just been growing exponentially since then. We're currently now in 40 states, and we ship nationwide. I'm in a Walmart, I'm in Giant, I'm in HEB out in Texas, and we just got picked up by 13 divisions of Kroger. So the idea really came from a need and a necessity and sort of just a gap in the market. Because if you are someone who has a food allergy or any type of wellness issue that requires you to eat a modified diet, while there are more and more products come out every single year. I go to these trade shows multiple times a year, and there's new gluten-free manufacturers. The science behind, the chemistry behind gluten-free baking is so challenging that the products end up sort of just converging and ending up being very, very similar. So even though they have new branding and maybe new marketing, the product inside the packaging is really very similar to what has been done in the past. And I wanted to break all of those prototypes. I found a completely different manufacturer. It's not a traditional gluten-free manufacturing facility. We are certified gluten-free, and we take all the precautions, do all the testing, and have all the certifications. But we basically came up with a process and ingredients from scratch to ensure that our product is really very differentiated and the highest quality possible.
Let's stop here for two things. Well, I
Mhm.
should have asked you before we went on the air. Do you have a package of your cookies that show us? Oh,
These are my cookies.
mm,
I have 7 flavors. This is our oatmeal raisin, which is sort of our winter flavor. We have our best seller is our oatmeal coconut, and then brown butter chocolate chip, vegan chocolate chip, which is vegan and gluten-free, double Dutch salted peanut butter, and shortbread, in addition to our cinnamon cookie.
okay. How have you financed yourself?
That is a really good question. In the beginning, I have a finance background, so I learned through, and I've done a lot. My finance background is specifically in wealth management, so I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs establish their wealth independently, and I realized that a lot of wealth is generated through debt and having access to debt capital, at least in the beginning, but even later in later stages. So I had really good credit, and at the time, because I had a banker's salary, had, access to credit lines. And so I literally just went around to the banks, as 3 or 4, probably Amex, a lot of Visa, and I opened up as many business credit cards as the banks would give me with as large a line of credit as I could get. And I ended up with $150,000 in lines of credit between my different credit cards. And then I used those to finance my business in the very beginning and kept everything very, very small. So I was only purchasing enough packaging to cover 2 months of maybe orders, only purchasing enough inventory to manufacture for that month. So I was never really using my entire line of capital. It was just sort of incurring the costs and then getting the cash flow back. So I never had a line of credit open on any credit card that was more than $10,000. And I would just disperse that across the credit card. So none of my lines of credit were ever fully used, which helped me maintain my lines of credit, kept my credit score good, and allowed me to have excess capital without sort of spending my own cash. I did that for a full year and a half. And then I went to, once I had enough sales volume, which happened for me relatively quickly, about 13 months to 18 months that occurred. So I went to a business bank, and they gave me a revolving line of credit and then a term loan of $90K. And that was more than enough that I needed to be able to facilitate my operations. And I kept my operations extremely tight. I was the only employee of the company. Everything else was either being me just selling, paying my manufacturer for the purchase orders as they came in. So I wasn't purchasing tons of packaging or inventory. I was just sort of purchasing for that quarter so that we would draw down on the inventory. I would get the cash flow back and then purchase again. So I was very, very conservative in the beginning, not trying to accumulate very much debt at all, and using my lines of credit. And then in 2022, I'd grown rapidly, exponentially. I'd gotten picked up by Walmart. It was going to be in over 40 states. And I was able to raise capital on Republic.co, which is a crowdfunding platform online. I set up a website, put my business plan up there. You can find it at Republic.co. It's actually under the brand Mighty Monkey. We've rebranded since then. And I raised $5 million. And that's the funding that I've been using since then. Again, I have more spending leeway now, and I'm able to invest in things like marketing and digital sales, and also promotions for my customers and things like that, but still sort of feeling like I'm bootstrapping along as much as I can so that we're hanging on to that capital and investing it as wisely as we can.
Well, stop here. Do you have a website so people can learn more?
Absolutely. So you can visit us at mightylicious.com. You can order all of our products on there. We actually just released our flour blends. These are the products that are going into Kroger. We have flour. This is all-purpose flour blend. This is our brownie mix. It's vegan and gluten-free. And then we also have a vegan gluten-free flour mix. And we decided to expand into the flour mix because it hasn't been innovated in like probably 4 decades at least. There aren't too many competitors there, and it's the biggest challenge for people with gluten-free, who are gluten-free or have food allergies, is not only finding products ready to eat, but also just finding a flour blend so that they can make their own product at home. Like once you become gluten-free, you can't even eat pancakes anymore because the flour blends are so miserable. They just don't work. So I decided as part of my process of perfecting my cookies, I had to come up, the first and most important step is coming up with the perfect flour blend. And that took months on end just to find a flour blend that would work and be compatible. And so there's a lot of innovation and months of research and a lot of tears crying that went into figuring out what my flour blend would be. And then one of the biggest hurdles is that we are rice flour based. That's the largest ingredient in our flour blend because it's neutral in flavor. So when you eat our cookies, you don't taste any weird bitter aftertaste. There's no chalky texture. There's no earthy texture that you often get with other flour blends. It just tastes what wheat flour would taste like, which is neutral. And we were able to achieve that because I realized that rice flour, even commercially, and I buy truckloads of rice flour, is milled for cooking. It's not milled for baking. So even when you go to these big international suppliers, their rice flour can't be used for baking. So we work directly with the mills in California to mill our flour to a spec so that it can actually be used for baking, which is what you're getting when you buy this. So you can make pancakes, you can make cookies, you can make, cakes, anything you want with this, it's going to work. The flour is going to be able to absorb the moisture. It's going to be able to homogenize. It's going to be able to create that baked good the same way that wheat flour would, just without the gluten, which is a tremendous technology. I did not realize how much technology exists in wheat as a grain, as a product, that we just now take for granted because they're really, unless you're gluten-free, you would never use anything other than wheat. And that's because of the gluten in the wheat and the way it's milled. It's perfect. We've perfected wheat flour and it works perfectly for most cuisines, whether you're cooking or baking. So I had to come up with the technology without using wheat and make it work for all of your needs, which was not easy. Once we went commercial, during COVID, some of our suppliers, ran out of stock. That happened with a lot of our ingredients. And so we had to find alternate suppliers. And that's when I learned, I was like, there is no alternate supplier for rice flour. I have to do it myself. There's no one who is milling it to a spec that can be used for baking. So we are now offering that to our clients because I think that's our customers, because I think that's a huge gap in the industry. Just being able to wake up in the morning and be like, I'm going to make pancakes this morning with my kids is a huge relief for me. And I know it will be for a lot of our customers.
Is it rice based, your flour?
Yeah, so the flour has a bunch of ingredients. They all are very important to the consistency, but it's rice flour, white rice flour, brown rice flour, tapioca starch, corn starch, potato starch, xanthan gum, and whole milk powder, which is the secret ingredient.
Let's stop here. You went over your name. Can you spell out your website for people?
Yes, it's mightylicious.com. So MIGHTYLICIOUS.com. So it's like mighty and delicious, but it's mightylicious.com.
How did you come up with that name?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was really important to me. The branding was really important to me. If you notice, my packaging is really fun and colorful, and we have a unicorn as our logo. And a lot of the gluten-free products out there, as I've mentioned, were invented a long time ago. A lot of them have really trite sort of packaging. It's not like being in the cereal aisle where you have all these fun colors and these like fun logos and different characters. It's sort of white and blue and black letters on a box, and it's not very appealing. It's not very interesting. It's not very engaging. And when I eat a terrible gluten-free product, obviously I feel bad for myself, but the people I really feel bad for and where my thoughts always go are to the kids who are diagnosed with celiac disease in infancy or when they're 1 or 2 or 3. So they've never had a cupcake. They've never had a piece of pie. They don't know what a cookie should taste like. And they're just been eating these terrible products that I personally would never feed myself, let alone feed to my child. And so I wanted the packaging to be accessible and engaging for children as well. A lot of the flavors are a little bit more sophisticated. They're totally palatable for children, but they're a little bit more geared for adults. Like we do a double Dutch that has a little bit of espresso in it, so it's really rich. We do a brown butter chocolate chip, so you're getting that sort of caramel toffee aftertaste in our product, which kids are going to love. They're just not going to appreciate it as much as an adult will. But I wanted, with that sophistication of the flavor profile, I wanted something that really is geared to little kids that they can identify with and feel excited about. And then the name Mighty Licious, I knew I wanted it to feel like Mickey Mouse or Mighty Mouse. I wanted it to have this feeling of a superhero and to appeal to like the inner child of the adults buying it. So Mighty was something that we came up with immediately. That was something we really knew we wanted. And then there were a lot of mighty names that were just taken. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, it's mighty and it's delicious. Why don't we call it Mightylicious? And that was not taken. When you go to trademark, Mightylicious, everything else that I'd come up with was taken. But Mightylicious was not taken at all. And I was like, that's it. I'm taking it, I'm getting the trademark.
Okay. Now, what's your exit strategy?
My exit strategy is to sell to Mondelez. I've actually already spoken to them. They're not interested in purchasing yet, but they're aware of my product. Their incubator program came up to me at a trade show. It's like, we've not been able to figure this out. We owned all these different gluten-free cookies, including Enjoy Life, which they actually removed from it. Enjoy Life cookies no longer exist. The company exists, but the cookies no longer exist. And they're like, we just can't figure it out. So that is the exit. Mondelez or some other large conglomerate is to sell for 100 million or more.
Okay. Well, a notable ambition. We just have a minute or two left. First off, give us your website again and spell it out. And what would you advise other entrepreneurs who are in your space, not space so much as your situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's so much to advise. So other entrepreneurs, I would advise to start small. That's what I did. And I really wanted to, I was around a lot of, when you work in banking, I was around a lot of people who started really successful businesses, became 100 millionaires, 500 millionaires by starting their company by selling peaches on the side of the road. Right. We're in a very different environment now. It's harder to sell peaches on the side of the road, period, let alone turn that into $100 million. But they started really small and they became the expert in that industry more so than any of their investors. And I wanted to have that kind of leverage. I wanted, when I started to raise capital and started bringing in these big people with big personalities and opinions, I wanted to have a lot of experience and knowledge and expertise so that my vision and my goal had a voice. And I think that really I've been able to maintain that. Really, no one, even my co-packer who makes 6 million cookies a week, defers to me on everything gluten-free, because he's like, there's no one, Carolyn, who knows it like you do, not even him. So I wanted to develop that expertise and really understand the process and make the cookies in the beginning myself. So I understood not only the recipes, but the manufacturing process, anything that could go wrong. And it also helped me sort of understand my finances, because I was paying everything out of pocket. So I understood all of my cash flow, all of my COGS, all of that really was intuitive to me from the beginning. And then it only took me about a year and a half before all of that knowledge and all of that expertise turned into something much larger that I could then leverage and expand. So that really worked for me. And oftentimes when you talk to private equity people, they'll like want to throw everything into the fire at once. That is a strategy, but it's also the higher the peaks, the lower the valleys. So I started off a little bit smaller so that when I was capable of taking those risks, I really understood the industry. And that's what I would advise people to do. Don't take out a huge mortgage on your house. Get some credit cards, start out small, and really understand your business and what you want it to be, and that you really want to do it, because it's your entire life. I do this 24/7. My kids are standing outside the door right now. They can't come in because I'm doing this interview. And then I'll go.
What is your husband involved in the business?
I actually have a wife. My wife is not. She is a marketing executive at Amazon. She does help me. She's a support system for me, and she has marketing skills that are very useful sometimes. And sometimes she has a network that's useful for me. But no, she's not an entrepreneur at heart. She's very good at being a corporate executive. So this is something that, and I actually started the business before I even met her. But she has been, she has been at the factory we've been together now for 7 years. So she would scoop cookies with me on the weekend when we were dating and stuff like that. But we are separate, but supportive of each other's careers. But you can find my cookies. We ship nationwide. If you order 3 bags or more of our cookies, shipping is free. To all 50 states. And you can find us at www.mightylicious.com. That's MIGHTYLICIOUS.com. So it's mightylicious.com.
On that note, we say thank you, Carolyn, for a very, very illuminating time. Thank you.
Thank you.